This is Auteur Detour, wherein three film lovers travel through the filmographies of cinema's most important directors in hopes of finding a greater understanding on the other side.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Auteur Detour. I'm Ian Hinckley, here as always with Chris Palazza.
Hello.
And Travis White.
Hi.
And we are working our way through Christopher Nolan's filmography. We're up to Interstellar. So I'm going to take you through the plot of that movie a little bit as quickly as I can for a 3.5 hour long movie.
It's less than 3 hours long, yeah, but it's long. It's long.
It feels 3.5
No way.
No, I'm kidding. Okay, in 2014, Christopher Nolan released his 9th film, a fuck yeah science sci-fi movie about man's plans of recolonizing a new planet on the other side of a black hole after Earth has essentially died and become uninhabitable. Matthew McConaughey plays Coop, an ex-NASA pilot turned farmer, widower, single dad, who through discovering gravitational anomalies in his daughter Murph's bedroom gets pulled into the mission and quickly and sadly leaves his family and attempts to save humankind. On his ship are Amelia Brand, played by Anne Hathaway, and a couple of other red shirt scientists, and a pair of robots, Tars and Case. Time flows differently in a black hole though, so what is hours to the crew is years back on Earth, where Coop's daughter Murph, Jessica Chastain now, is growing into a brilliant scientist who uses clues in the gravitational anomaly to solve a previously impossible equation and helps to save the lives of the humans on Earth in preparation for their new planet. There are 3 planets to choose from. The first is a water planet with deadly mountain-sized waves. The second is a wasteland where a previous mission helmer Matt Damon is waiting to kill them and take over the ship. He fails. And the aptly named Endurance, piloted now by Anne Hathaway, makes it to the third and successful planet. Coop gets sucked into a tesseract in the black hole created by future time-traveling humans, where he watches his daughter grow up and feeds her the equation by causing the gravitational anomaly. When he's done, he's spit out in time to say goodbye to his now very old and dying daughter. Does all that make sense? I don't know, but do you guys like it? Personally, I love it.
I'm going to have to disagree with you a little bit on your science work there, Ian. They're not going to the other side of a black hole. They're going to the other side of a wormhole, which is a very complicated scientific thing to understand. You have to fold a piece of paper and stick a pencil through it in order to get it. So I don't have time to get into that right now. But so
this is theoretical physics. This is Travis White speaking.
The time isn't flowing differently in a black hole. It's when you get closer to a black hole.
When you get closer, listen, I had like 3 minutes to describe this insanely complicated
so you
movie.
Just plug in black hole whenever there's a question. That's fair enough. It's close enough. I confused the Dalai Lama with Siddhartha Buddha in our last podcast, so I assumed we would stop.
Okay, I said black hole, I meant wormhole, but what I meant is that, you know, you guys know what happens in this movie. I mean,
the closer you get,
most people don't know what happens.
Your smile gets all funky. The guitar.
Yeah, so even in the ship that's not, even in the Endurance that's not going into the wormhole, they don't age as quickly. I get it. I mean, yeah, whatever.
Okay.
But the point is that's all that happens, and that he gets sucked into a tesseract at the end for 45 minutes, and that's an amazing sequence. But tell me, what do you guys like about this movie? Do you guys like this movie?
Travis, you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll go first. Okay, so I saw this on IMAX when it came out, and it was such an intense experience, like on the IMAX screen, like maybe his most thrilling movie, maybe his grandest movie, with the music playing at like full tilt, and Michael Caine reciting Dylan Thomas or whatever. Like if you like, what's his name?
Gary Oldman.
If you like Gary Oldman reading Charles Dickens, he was just like, I'm gonna keep doing that. Find me old, like esteemed actors and have them read like English classics. Yeah, a big, beautiful, grand movie. So I went back and saw it multiple times. It was actually interesting because the giant IMAX film strips, I feel like the projectors in the like IMAX theater didn't know how to like take care of them like for as long a time as this movie played, and they got all degraded and cruddy as the time went on. But the thing I had to run and grab before the podcast was I bought the Blu-ray, and it came with a piece of film from the IMAX, and it's like this giant picture of Anne Hathaway. So I put it in a floating frame so you can like put the light through it and see it.
Oh, that's awesome! That's awesome. That's so cool.
Thank you. What'd you guys bring?
Nice. This movie is one of the most the greatness of Christopher Nolan and the weaknesses of Christopher Nolan are both on like in the same movie in the most extreme of ways, I think, to me. And by that I mean like the things I don't like about Christopher Nolan are like ramped up to the nth degree, like characters that just feel really just there for exposition and are not really like they're least human of any movie maybe that he's made so far. But at the same time, some of them, not all. McConaughey gives an amazing performance. I love McConaughey in this movie. Initially, I was like, him as a farmer / like astronaut / physicist, but he's great.
You've had like, shit to say about Matthew McConaughey before.
I did, and I actually really like him in this movie.
He's the only like reclaimed movie star in our lifetime that I feel like deserved it. Like I feel like he really is the best. I mean, maybe Robert Downey Jr. too kind of deserves it too. But like, this happens all the time where, you know, they call it the McConaissance, where like he came in and was suddenly everywhere and giving these incredible performances. And fucking hey, he's good.
No. But so, and you know, and then some of the some of the writing feels so awkward, and some of it's just so stilted. But at the same time, this movie, I actually really love this movie as a whole, because what he does so well is just this ride that it takes you on, especially someone going in blind, having no idea what's going to happen next. I mean, they show up on this water planet that just looks like knee-deep water or whatever, and then this giant moving wave that just baffles anything towers over anything you've ever seen, that comes periodically. They're losing all this time, and well, what's the next world going to look like, you know? Then they get sucked into a black hole. What's going to happen next? You know, it really keeps you, even though it's a 2-hour and 45-minute long movie, I still found myself having no idea what is going to happen next and how anything's going to tie back to, you know, these weird ghost things that you see or hinted at in the beginning of the movie, right? So, like I said, the strengths and the weaknesses of Christopher Nolan are all amped up to an incredible degree, but the result is a movie that's like amazing to watch. It's amazing to see. It's a great experience. I love the audio in it. With a few exceptions, but on the whole, really enjoyed this movie. Got way more out of it this time than I did the first time. Specifically because, when I first saw this movie, I thought that the world, quote, when they say the world, I meant like their world, like Smallville, Kansas. It felt like, they just kept having dust blow up around. I'm like, oh no, that's sad. But then there's this like NASA station that you can just kind of drive to that's hidden, and like they're going to go save the world of Smallville, Kansas. I didn't understand the scope that the apocalyptic world was occupying when I first saw this movie. I didn't realize, like, fully grasp that the whole world was kind of being endangered, and so it was really confusing when there's these like robots that show up. He's like, "Oh, you Marine decommit." I'm like, "What? Why are you talking to this insane-looking robot thing?" It's like, it's normal, you know? It came out of the blue, and it was really hard for me to wrap my brain around initially. So this next viewing made way more sense. It was much more of like a world that was already created for me to like give that like the movie my full attention. So
one of the coolest things this movie does is we've talked about like Christopher Nolan, the political filmmaker, and like sets up this world in collapse, right? And it feels so. It's one of the most interesting. It's not quite post-apocalyptic. It's like coming upon an apocalypse, but like,
right.
But just, like kind of like not with a bang, but with a whimper, right? It's like how the whole thing of like, there's a blight, all the food is dying. Like it feels very like perfunctory and very like MacGuffin-y, but at the same time, all the details are so compelling and so like, holy shit, we're like an iota away from this reality, like The Dark Knight Rises, where it felt like, he kind of like was able to foresee, you know, this kind of like rising this popular uprising thing. In this movie, he kind of like foresees like this collapse where there's no truth anymore, right? The teachers and like the way that like reality is turned into propaganda. Like, I mean, I just loved those sequences. And Chris, to your point about like the way the movie takes you on this ride, like when the random like Indian drone like zooms by, you know, and they have to drive up to it. That's a beautiful sequence, and then they kind of like hack it, and he like flies it around. But it's also like just a really weird vision of like America in the future, where like there is no superpower maybe anymore. The Yankees are like playing like this like little league game. It's just a really cool vision.
I want to say, before we move on from that, because I think it's really interesting that they also introduce it as something that happened in the past. Like the movie opens with documentary footage, or fake documentary footage of future humans past 2067 when the movie takes place, being like, this is what we went through. You know, so it's
actually
real.
Saying, like, I think it's actually real documentary footage, except Ellen Burstyn. He borrowed it from Ken Burns, I think, the Dust Bowl movie, or at least some of it. He actually borrowed.
I heard that
footage.
too. Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah,
but you know, I know what you mean.
But I just mean like it's interesting to like
he repurposed it, which is a weird choice, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it. But
it's also interesting that like the first 40 minutes of this movie or whatever it is that are that whole sequence essentially, and that, you know, before he goes on his trip, that's what like the script was originally before he got to Christopher Nolan, and then so it kind of has a different tone.
That's so funny because it's exactly that's what I said about Blade Runner 2049. I was like, because it ends with them, they're gonna start the robot rebellion or whatever the hell, and I was like, if this was a Christopher Nolan movie, this entire movie, this 3-hour thing, this would have been Elliot Page just rattling off all this information over 20 minutes, and then we would get to the rebellion, then they would have the rebellion. Anyway, that's great. That's really funny to know. Because
it was Jonathan Nolan put the script together like to work with, I think, Steven Spielberg, right, and that was going to be, it makes more sense to think of this like sort of weirdly Superman Americana world as like a Spielberg movie. You know, it doesn't really fit into like Nolan's world, the Smallville thing, like you said, Chris, because it's like, you know, you can picture sort of Steven Spielberg's version of that part of the movie, especially, you know, just like playing the baseball game, you know, and like Nolan got that and was just like, okay, we'll put that, like you said, Travis, like we'll put that in the first 25 minutes of the movie, and then we're gonna get into science.
And it does feel a little bit like Tinker Toyed together, like the movie, like The Dark Knight Rises did. You know what I mean? He's like way more interested in building these kind of like thrilling sequences. I mean, you said that wave scene, Chris, like seeing that on IMAX for the first time, when they're like, those aren't mountains. You're like, wait, what? You know, it's like coming towards you. You're just like, it's
especially as a surfer, right? I mean, you know, having been in the water before. Well, Travis and I went to UCSB. We're not trained to like little waves, but this is something altogether different, right?
I made surf music sounds when the ship was like gliding down the ocean.
Little Dick Dale Kadar riff.
Yeah.
But I think it was a good choice, though. Speaking of the world and setting the tone for the world, the same thing that kind of confused me initially was actually a really brilliant choice to only focus, really, because this is a global phenomenon. But we only see really this small kind of corn agricultural community, essentially, but it's representative of the world, I think, and that's actually kind of nice to contain the film within a certain, you know, limitation, so you can really frame the characters and what happens after that. So that actually, in retrospect, was a nice choice, I think, on Nolan's part.
And it's also like Americans don't do anything but grow corn. I mean, it's just, again, like us 1/2 step away from like reality. Like, you know, when he's like, should have grown corn instead of okra, instead of the last crop ever of okra. Like,
and everything they eat at the table, I think, is actually corn based. They just have corn chowder. They're eating corn bread. Like, it's only corn. If you look at what they're eating,
well,
I'm
you
like,
have
what is
Pepsi's,
this?
Cheetos, like, you know, like that's what our
high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah. But speaking of like good performances, you were talking about obviously what's his name? Matthew. But you know, I'm a John Lithgow hater, but he gives a surprisingly decent performance in this movie, in my opinion.
He's only toned it down a little bit, but he's
enough to not distract me in the movie.
I did think it would be very funny if Christopher Nolan's just like slowly working through the Third Rocket from the Sun cast, like
That's
if French
funny. That's where he
Stewart's going to be
discovered
Oppenheimer.
them. Yeah. He probably looks more like Oppenheimer than Cillian Murphy.
I know.
Killian, whatever. But I got such a kick out of it the first time I saw it, and they were like, when I realized, wait, he's a millennial. You know, like that's who John Lithgow is. Like he's a millennial. He's talking about when I was young, they invented a new thing every day. I was like, holy shit! Like he's talking about right now. Like, I got a big kick out of that.
Yeah, I thought he was fine. I mean, it's more that interesting to me that like every role in this movie is somebody, you know, like I guess that's just where Christopher Nolan is right now. But like,
people are flocking.
You know, it's fucking even people that weren't somebody yet, like in that opening sequence with Timothée Chalamet as the
I remember him being like something before this movie, and I remember when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I've heard about this kid. Like he's good. Yeah,
really?
yeah, and he nails it too. He's a great actor. I was like, they had to find somebody good to match up with Casey Affleck, and they did.
Right? Yeah. Imagine going down and like 45 minutes later to an hour, you realize your son has turned into Casey Affleck. Is there any more like disappointing realization on Earth?
Wait,
no.
So the year this movie came out, I think I've already said this, but the year this movie came out, Boyhood came out. This movie, within its grand scope, contains the movie Boyhood in miniature when he watches that video of his son.
That's a really good point.
Same year. Again, I feel like Christopher Nolan is tapped into something at this point of his career. It's crazy.
I'm gonna go back to Chris's sort of initial review because you said, well, maybe I'll just go get at it this way.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a realization this week watching this movie that for whatever reason this movie hits me so much harder in the same way that Inception hits you guys. It works for me in such a different way, and I don't know why, because it's not what I realized is that there's not a single one of these 9 Christopher Nolan movies any person could say that it's their favorite one, and I would be like, interesting, and I wouldn't think that that's crazy, except for maybe Insomnia, because it's so different, even though I liked Insomnia a lot. But what I realized is there's no Emperor's New Clothes thing with Christopher Nolan, I don't think, where people are like the way that we watched Glass Onion and we're like, what the fuck is everybody talking about? It's not good. You know what I mean? How do I only see that this movie sucks and everybody's saying it's so, I would never do that about any not Inception, even though I had a slightly less opinion of it than you guys. Right. And I think it's just like you said, it's for whatever reason it hits you in a certain nerve, and this one really does hit me. And when you were saying, Chris, that there's more sort of inhuman characters, to me this is by far his most human movie. I don't know why it hits me that way, but obviously it's not just the amount of crying that happens in it, which is a lot of crying, and really vulnerable, close-up, powerful crying, not just from Matthew McConaughey, but Anne Hathaway. And go ahead, Chris, you want to say something?
No, I think, you know what, you're touching on, I think maybe the reason it's amplified to me is because he actually he wants to create the most interconnected, most interpersonal sort of relationships as a core of his movies, more so than maybe any other, right? I know in Inception, it's we got to go get to my kids, but we're going to make this amazing movie around that sort of idea. But he tries to create these bonds, the idea of, love being this force that transcends space and time, and that's the whole driving force of the film, and he brings that back over and over and over again. But I think it's the way he creates his characters that maybe amplifies why it doesn't quite work for me, even though he's trying to keep that emotional core really, really focused in this movie more so than probably any other one, at least up to this point. So I think it's because it's there that it's highlighted that it
Yeah,
doesn't
I mean,
work
it
so
definitely
much
feels like
for me.
he's trying to like find his human side.
And I appreciate that. I really do.
And
It's a
then,
movie about
He's
the
like
vastness
Tars.
of space.
He's like
because of-
Tars adjusting the dials. He's like
Exactly.
emotion 99%.
60%.
66%.
Yeah.
Okay, let's back it up. And really, he's only got to like 25.
No. What?
you know,
What?
No,
This
I'm
is
just
an
kidding.
incredibly emotional movie.
This is
I watched,
such
when I
an
turned this
emotional
movie, I
movie
was
for
like,
me.
yeah, too bad Christopher Nolan can't do emotion, huh?
I know.
Haters, what's up? But
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree
I
with
mean,
Chris,
this is such an emotional
it's
movie.
his most emotional movie by far. And again, that boyhood sequence is so moving, and
That's the moment,
and just
yeah.
listening to Michael Caine do poetry while the ship is taking off and listening to the music is emotional. But
But I also love
think
in that
it is very hollow, and it is so tinker-toyed together that like the characters being hollow. I mean, or not hollow, but just like perfunctory. It's structural. It's not like flesh and blood.
Well, I called the like red shirt guys, like the Wes Bentley and Romilly, whoever that actor is.
Yep.
Like they are absolutely perfunctory characters.
Yeah.
But in every Christopher Nolan movie they are, and this one at least has like Michael Caine has a character in this movie, and he almost never does. Like,
yeah, he's got an amazing
what I mean?
voice
Like,
and look to
he's
this
got an
movie. He does
incredible
this like
character
weird
in this movie.
staccato voice thing.
Like the
So
fact that he kind of is the bad guy in a weird way.
Oh, yeah, he
like
is.
not in the, like, and it's like he didn't have to do that. He could have just had him be Michael Caine in this movie.
Yeah.
Like he has been in every other Christopher Nolan movie. Like he was in The Prestige,
Mhm.
and like that would have been fine. I would have totally accepted that. But then when there's this reveal, and I love that's what I was gonna say when he starts doing the poem and she rolls her eyes like, okay, here we go. It's like I love that moment. It's such a great moment because like I do think that there's more character in this movie than in his other movies. I mean,
Jessica Chastain has some clunky ass dialogue to deliver, and she is super game, and she gives it all her like a great shot. But I'll say two things about her performance, which is one, she's way more compelling when she's being like a badass and like going, "Did you know, Bran? You knew, didn't you?" Like she's so scary in those moments compared to when she's like, "But Professor, we tried this already." Like she doesn't
Totally.
quite pull that off the same way. And the worst line in the film, either because of what it has to do or how it's delivered or whatever, is when she's like, "I'm saying you've been doing this with one hand. No, two hands tied behind your back." And I just
Totally.
don't understand why. And it's like,
Yeah.
there's so much, that's such a load-bearing line. And it's written so like awkwardly, and I feel so strongly for Jessica Chastain because I really like her as an actress, and I love
Right.
seeing redheads in cinema. That I am a big supporter of her, but
yeah.
doesn't quite pull it off. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
I think she's amazing in this movie, personally. I mean, I totally agree with you. Not just her dialogue, so much of the dialogue in all of his movies is like, it's
I was just gonna say, I think
it's so expositional that it's load bearing.
yes,
Like you
and
said, like, it feels like
I love his exposition. Like I've been kind of saying in some of the other episodes, I love just getting out that information and building lore and building the world. That can be really fun stuff to me. And sometimes these like two-dimensional characters, like Rom, are better at doing that kind of thing because they're so two-dimensional that they can just like act like that, and you're just like, oh, thank you for that. It's like when you're playing a video game and a person comes up and like, don't go in those forests. There's things that, you know what I mean? It's like, that's all you're there for. It's perfect. And then when you give those lines to somebody like Jessica Chastain, it can come off almost worse because they're so good. It's like when Elaine from Seinfeld had that New Adventures of Old Christine show, and it was like, you're better than this. It was like harder to watch because she was so good. And the show was so
how good
bad.
she is.
I'm gonna bring everything back to sitcoms if we
To
allow
90s
it.
sitcoms, yeah.
But anyway,
But the other one is Anne Hathaway, the other major character in this movie. And to me, we talked about her last week and how I think she gets kind of a bum rap, but I also get it for a lot of her movies. This is my favorite performance of hers and always will be. I think she's incredible in this movie. She's like a character actress because she's like, I mean, even though she's so vulnerable in it and she has those close-up crying moments and everything like that, it always feels like it's like less showy than it could be. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a movie. There's no movie star moments in her performance. And that's really impressive for her, who is a movie star and has these moments that could be that. But it's like in service of the movie when she does her big breakdowns. And I mean, that scene when Matthew McConaughey shuts her down after her like big speech about how maybe love is the biggest force in the universe with gravity, you know? And he just goes like in like captain mode, which is like the second mode of his performance that he has. He's got like captain mode and emotional dad mode. And when he's in his captain mode and he's like, I just don't see it or whatever. It's like, we're not going to do it. And like this moment that she gives where she just like has to suck it up. And I just think it's an incredible performance. Like I really was moved by it last night.
Cool.
Yeah.
Chris disagrees. You don't like it.
I don't dislike it. It's just kind of is, I don't know. It didn't stand out in any way to me. And just some of the, I don't know. I felt kind of like that whole love, diatribe was a little on the heavy-handed, a little more clunky side. I understand its need, but yeah, please do, Travis.
You understand love is necessary, but you find it annoying and perfunctory?
Yeah.
I told my friend, I was like, when this movie came out, I was like, dude, did you see Interstellar? It's so good. She's like, yeah, I saw it. I was like, what'd you think? She's like, there was a lot of like weed talk like from the people. It was like they just smoked weed and were like, do you think love is like the most powerful thing in the world? And it was like,
that's
I
pretty
can
good.
see that. Watching it this time, in this series of Christopher Nolan films, like it really struck me how, what he was talking about in this movie was like the same thing he talks about in all his movies, where he feels like the world is like kind of like haunted by these like forces that we don't understand, and this desire to believe in something bigger, right? That's like this ongoing Christopher Nolan thing. There's an amazing moment in this movie which echoes The Prestige. I don't know if you guys caught it, but where Romilly hits the side of the vessel and he's like, this gets to me, just this, and he hits the side. And it was exactly like when Christian Bale hits the wall and he's like, you don't want to believe the world is just this, and he like hits the wall like it's just this rock thing. And it's very much just like, I can't accept like that this material reality is like my entire reality. Like I can't wrap my head around that. It doesn't feel right. And this movie is very supernatural, and it has like all these like ghosts and magical powers and stuff like that. And in the end, there's no God. There's no actual supernatural stuff happening. There's no alien life. There's maybe organics, quote unquote, but there's no life on any of these planets. Even on any of the 3 bear planets, even the one that's like just right. But there is like some other stuff out there that we don't understand and can't comprehend, and maybe we will in the future. But it's like there is something kind of magical and spiritual beyond us.
It's more just, it's all human endeavor to persevere. Like it's all endurance.
It's within us.
Yeah, exactly. Like he realizes that, the thing that saved us is us.
Right.
Like in the future, we don't know how. It's a very Nolan, like, we'll get to that when we get to it. Maybe that's an Interstellar
right,
too.
It's like a plot hole. And it is it is a leap when he says, "Oh, I know what it was. It was just us." Like it's not like that was spelled out or anything like that. But again, that intuition is again part of what Nolan is like kind of calling attention to, that human like that seemingly like sixth sense, right?
Yeah. It's funny about the love thing that you were talking about, because that whole sequence, it does feel unnatural, and it doesn't feel like he really has that point to make. I think it's great.
It works.
And I think it works. You know what other movie made this point?
No.
What?
Another Matthew McConaughey, Contact.
God damn it, I've never seen that movie.
That was Jodie Foster?
Shit. Yeah, you should see it. But Matthew McConaughey plays like a spiritual like priest or something. I don't know, whatever he is. But he plays the guy who's like, there's more to the world than science, kind of thing. And like Jodie Foster's just all science. And the point of that movie is the same, kind of a similar one to this one, which is just like, no, you need like science and love to pull you through. It's just kind of an interesting, like I said, it's kind of clunky. And Chris, you can roll your eyes as much as you want, but it is like mildly successful at least. And it does work in that, like, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is like, it is that Christopher Nolan trying to turn up his humanity and to me it fully works.
Well, that's not.
But I.
What? But what? Yeah. But what?
To me it fully works, but it doesn't. You know, it does also. I can sort of still see the mathematics behind it in a weird way for him. Like it is in like spoken in these very Christopher Nolan style speeches that are like.
But I just don't see. I don't feel like it's like him turning up his humanity, unless. I mean, I do think that a lot of the emotion in this movie, I wonder if it came from him kind of responding to criticisms, you know, that he kind of very slowly was like, you know, internalizing about lack of emotion, lack of humanity in his films. And maybe that's why he calls it love, because it doesn't have to be that, you know what I mean? It's just, he's talking about these forces though. But I feel like he's talking about those in all his movies, like even in Memento, like he's talking, you know, he's driven by this like thing about his wife. Like that's just like a hair difference between the two kind of forces, you know? Yeah. And that movie is very much like, you know, piecing a life together mathematically, but then you're lying to yourself because you have this this drive that you can't ever satisfy or something. I don't know. I feel like that's something he touches on in all his movies, this kind of internal drive that's like good and bad, and also comes from somewhere where you can't pin it down like a Lepidopterist, right? You can't like quantify it. Just like I'm turning into Anne Hathaway now, but like it's not something that you can like put on a spreadsheet. It's something beyond that, and those are those kind of like contrasting forces. I feel like are the key to Christopher Nolan's oeuvre. I think that's like the like a force that guides him. He's not all mathematical, and I think right there's always that element in his movies where things are getting away from you, and it's scary. Right. And in this movie, it's kind of like. He calls it love, but it's like it could look like something else in a different story or something. And Anne Hathaway is good in this movie, and she is when you say she has no movie star moments, I see what you mean in terms of her performance, but also something about the way the lens is on her makes her look not as hot as she did in Dark Knight Rises. Like she was so beautiful in Dark Knight Rises. In this movie, she's like. Her nose looks big, she's like crying, and her teeth look big, and her hairdo is like all short. And she just like that shot of her being like, what if it's just about love? And Matthew kind of has like, you need to like take a break, like go take a shower. She really is.
Put on some makeup.
Yeah. Not what I'm saying. Yeah. No, it's funny. But it was really striking that she was like, you know, that he made her look like that with those like I don't know what he was doing with lenses or something, but it was cool.
Yeah, I know, but exactly. But like, especially in just those initial moments when you're kind of seeing her on the ship, it's just like, yeah, she's like being vulnerably like real right now, you know, like as an actress.
And Matt Damon had a similar vulnerability when he woke up from his tube, his like
fucking Matt Damon.
Microwave
Can we talk about Matt Damon?
Let's talk about it. So they did not advertise that Matt Damon was going to be in this film. No, and when I saw it like on opening night or a couple days after or whatever, I was like, what? You know? Yeah. I was shocked.
But I mean, when he pops up, to me,
it maybe
was
just when he's taken out of the pouch.
He pops onto the screen.
When you hear the microwave ding and you unzip him.
It is a like comic moment to me when it happens. It was in the theater. It was just like, oh, okay, that guy. I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't like Matt Damon except for in True Grit. But I don't know. He's doing something in this movie where he's like whiny ass Matt Damon. I don't know. Not my favorite actor.
Oh, I thought he was good. I thought it was
and I think people were, you know, not only surprised that he was in the movie at all, but he's not commonly one, not the lead, and two, not the bad guy, right? So there was all the like the twist after twist involving Matt Damon, and then he gets to sort of like he probably like. You know, oh man, I got to get my mojo back. So, okay, Ridley, let's make a movie where I go back into space and I'm the good guy now. And the next year being The Martian.
Yeah, that's right.
But I feel like, I feel like he had to be making The Martian when this was being.
Well, he was on Mars, so he just swung by the.
Yeah, right.
But I just mean like they came out within.
He got tired of corn, started making potatoes. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a weird moment.
It is. I was trying to make the point. Like it is a very unique moment. It's very interesting, and I think he was trying to do a thing where he's like, let's take this venerable. And Ian, obviously, this is not your view of what it was, but this is Christopher Nolan's thinking. Like, let's take this like venerable, lovable, modern movie star, someone who is, maybe comparable to, I don't know, like Tom Hanks or something back in the day, and bring him in just as a shock to the movie, like, hey, it's this guy we all love, and then have him be this kind of like almost like Colonel Kurtz who's like gone bad, like, and yeah, he is really pathetic and gross, and when he wakes up and he's just crying because he knows he betrayed them, but then he has to be like, oh yeah, it was just like really a big shock to see everybody,
Yeah,
it was but he's gone fully insane. I think it was really, really interesting, whether you love it or not, or whether you think it's like funny or not. Like, you have to admire like doing that.
no,
like,
I do,
that
and
off.
I do
Like,
think
it's
that
crazy.
like
Totally.
it's not the most successful story point in the movie to me. I think that like the first time that I watched it, there's so much being thrown at you in terms of like not just story, but also like overdone science facts that they want to throw at you, because this movie was so invested in like making sure that the science was good, and so it's throwing you a lot of just information that like I wasn't really picking up on the fact that there's this other story of the what's the Lazarus or whatever it was, like the previous mission where I kind of like I remember knowing about the Anne Hathaway being in love with one of them part of that storyline, but I didn't realize until this watch like how much they were talking up Captain Man, whatever it was,
Talk about
and
clunky dialogue. Like, there's no scene in the Batman movies where people are just like, Batman is like the best fighter. He's the best guy, and he comes in and like you just see him do it.
Yeah.
You just see him do the
they're
stuff.
like, no,
You just
man
go,
is
you're
the
in for a
best of
show.
us.
Here he goes.
Yeah,
That line,
yeah.
man is the best of us. Like, you kind of see what they're going for, but it's very annoying to hear.
I mean, it
Bad
makes
dialogue.
sense in retrospect. Like I said, like I caught it this time around, but the first time I didn't even like. I remember it kind of like not even knowing that this was going to be a guy.
Okay,
You know
but they
what I
could have,
mean?
yeah, they
And
could
then
have
when
done
it
it like
pops up, it's just like
maybe it would have added too much to the screenplay, like too many words, like, and I'm sure they were like at their limit already, but they could have said something like, what man did was this. He stood up, he said, let's blah, blah, blah. He was like so inspiring, and he convinced us in this way, and he got these people to do it. Like, they just go, he's the best dude in the world. He's handsome, he's chill, like, it just doesn't work. Like, it reminded me of, who writes like that is Stephen King, if you ever read his books. Like, he's not good
Definitely.
he's not good at like creating a believable like atmosphere of like a guy being cool. So he just says like every joke he said, we all laughed, and it's like we couldn't
he
believe
was the
how
kind
funny
of guy
it was.
that we loved everything about him.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then the part like when he sabotages Matthew McConaughey, and McConaughey's like gasping for air, and he's walking. I can't look at you. But okay, just don't
I
talk.
know.
Don't say anything at all. Most people who
I like-
like, why are you speaking right now? You're like you're
was-
making your
I like
own
that part 'cause
emotional.
he's just
I thought I
so
could, but I
insane.
can't.
He's just like he's looking back and he's just like, do you see your kids? Do you see? Like, it's so creepy.
Right?
Like, I thought that was
Exactly.
pretty effective. I did enjoy that part.
No. Oh my God. Well, at least Christopher Nolan finally got to work Michael Mann into one of his movies, if by name only. Let's just squeak
Yeah,
that one in
totally,
there.
right?
Oh, is
Yeah.
that
I
his
thought
name,
about
Michael
that
Mann?
too.
No, man.
Or just
I
man,
mean, maybe
it's just
and maybe
man.
it's spelled
That
the
makes
same
sense.
That
way.
makes sense.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Wait, last clunky bit of that part is when they unzip him and he kind of rises as if from the dead, and then in the next scene he's drinking his tea and he's like, "You literally rose me from the dead," and they're like, "Lazarus."
Lazarus.
And they might as well have like looked at the camera. I was like, "Come on, like Christopher Nolan, I thought you
Dude.
respected your audience." Like,
Exactly.
There is
Exactly
so
what
much
I'm
of
talking.
that.
That's exactly
Yeah,
the
no,
sort of
Chris,
thing I'm talking about.
I see what you're saying, but
I don't
those
want to
moments
disagree
are
with
so
that part of
small
it.
compared to
I
the
just
big
think
picture. In my
that's what I'm
in my
saying.
opinion.
That's what I was trying to say, is that like how it for me, that those moments are all in Inception too, right? Like that's the thing. Is like I feel like every one of his movies has these things that are like whether they hit you in this nerve or this nerve, like that's just how it works.
Maybe, but I do think like it is going back to Christopher Nolan. It is quantifiable, and I think there's more of them in this movie. I think that is mathematically true, but I could be wrong.
I mean, that's
could be wrong.
probably true. But also, this movie has I don't know.
Because when we
I don't
get to
wanna compare
Tenet,
it
we need
but-
to scientifically prove it is the worst Christopher Nolan movie. That's very important to me.
We'll see.
We need
We'll see.
to come. I need to prove it, so it has to be.
Can I just say we
quantifiable.
also we've gotten 40 minutes into this podcast or so, and we haven't talked about TARS and Case, and I think that was like,
Dude.
when I first saw the movie, was the most impressive thing about the movie. Like I was
so?
I mean, just in terms of like an original sci-fi idea, right?
How?
Of just like, oh, this is what like robots should be like in movies. Like it was these characters, like it was like seeing like Chewbacca in Star Wars, where you're like, oh yeah, like this is what aliens should be like in these movies, you know, like space buddies. Like this was like, oh yeah, robots shouldn't be C-3PO or like, you know, whatever they've always been. They should be these sort of like
Swiss Army knife.
mechanical beings. Yes, Swiss Army knives. Great call. And, you know, I didn't love the humor thing, but I did love that, like,
That's probably the best part of the
the
whole.
joke.
I was gonna
about
say
the-
Tars
the best
is the
dialogue
best
in the whole
character in the
movie.
entire film. He's the funniest character. When he turns his humor settings down and he goes knock knock, and he's like, "Don't make me do it again."
Don't make me
That is
55.
my
Yeah,
favorite
yeah.
moment of the movie. I'm like Tars.
Right?
I love Tars.
No, I get it. I mean, I do love. I was just not finished with my sentence, but I was gonna say I do love that like they had a light for when he's being funny, because like that was like a very cool idea and like a good Nolan sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like Nolan needs that.
Yeah, right. Totally.
The irony of Tars, because I'm like, oh, whose voice is this? I just wanted to know whose voice it was, and I look it up and it's Bill Irwin. I'm like, who's that? And I look at his face and I'm like, oh, what?
yeah, Bill Irwin.
This is
Yeah,
a person who, if I'm a total dad, and he is Mr.
Mr. Noodle.
Mr.
or whatever.
Noodle on Sesame Street on the
Yeah.
Elmo segment, but he
Yeah,
never
yeah.
says a single word. He's on like every episode for years, but you have no idea. At least me, I had no idea what his voice sounded like. So for him to have this like anyway, I just thought that was
So-
a really odd and
Well, so he
awesome
also
touch.
puppeteered both of those
Yeah,
robots,
right,
right? So
right.
that's like the
He
incredible.
started in the Bay Area with the Pickle Family Circus, and I just found this out this weekend. And it was not because of it was not through research for this podcast. I just stumbled upon it because I came across something referencing Piccadilly Circus in England, and I was just like, and it like unlocked this memory, and I was like, wait a minute, is Pickle
cool.
Family
No
Circus
way.
from the Bay Area a pun based on that? Like I did not get that as
is,
a child. Pickle Family Circus is like a regional circus from like Northern California from like the 70s, and it was around in the 80s when we were kids. And apparently Bill Irwin was one of their original 3 clowns.
Well, and I think he did, because my dad was the chairman of Amnesty International through my childhood, and I think he was a like very good activist with them and like did a lot of the shows for them. Because I remember Bill Irwin being like a massive figure in my childhood, because my dad just talking about like the last real clown, you know what I mean?
yeah.
And then like he joined Sesame Street after we were too old for it, but
Right.
I cut some of
Not
those.
how
I
people
cut some
know
of those
him,
years.
I
Those were
think.
good years. The late 90s. I never gave up on it. It's like The Simpsons. It's like no, there's like it gets bad for a while, but then it gets better. So you just got to keep watching.
Yeah, anyway, I think that those characters are like the first time I watched it, especially, I was less impressed this time, even though I was it's still, like you said, it's the best part of the movie. But the first time I watched it, I was like, fuck, man, I love this. Like, I love Tars. I love Case. Like, they're so good.
I like when they talk to each other. There's even a shot of the two of them where they like there's just two like rectangles, and they're like, "Hello, Tars. Hello, Case." It's just like, thanks for that cutaway. That's like very
totally
dignified.
to that point, dude. There was a part where I think in the early part of the movie where they're in the ship and McConaughey says something to him and then walks away to Tars, and then Tars just kind of turns and like looks at him as he walks away. Like, there's no real need for him to do that, but like I love that little touch. Like,
They were
looking at him.
so bizarre looking the first time I saw it, and I feel like, I guess they had some kind of idea of how they worked, and like some moments you're like, oh, they kind of do this, they do this, and it's like that classic Christopher Nolan thing where he doesn't show it all, like to like spell it out maybe, but you get the idea kind of. But I also think they cheated a little bit where it like maybe wouldn't work, or you have to kind of like imagine it kind of like the Batman suits, you know, like where they can't show the legs in the first one because they don't really work. Or they just look like folded up rubber or something. But yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah, it was a little confusing the first time I saw it because the first time you encounter one is right when Matthew McConaughey breaks into the secret NASA facility. Like, what are you doing here? How'd you find the coordinates to this place? I thought it was just like a voice box from someone else. I'm like, where's the person who's talking to him coming from? But of course, it's the actual robot itself, which becomes clear a little bit.
But then you also have McConaughey sitting there being like, nah, I'm not going to talk to you. Like, his full, like, Southern charm in that moment, especially, like, trying to be like...
You're going to lose me in 10 days if you keep up with this.
I think that, again, we didn't really talk about... I mean, I kind of mentioned how much I love this era of Matthew McConaughey, and like this performance is incredible. I mean, he was cast off of Mud, which hadn't come out yet, but he saw that Jeff Nichols movie Mud, and he, you know, that was kind of before that. Everybody was anti Matthew McConaughey, like he was in fucking actor jail, kind of. He was making all these shitty rom-coms and Sahara and all these fucking terrible, like he was just bad and not doing good movies. And then he made that movie Mud, and I think there was another one, maybe Lincoln Lawyer or something, that he was kind of catching some buzz about. McConaughey, like, it was such a fight for Christopher Nolan to get him in this movie because he was not, like, you know, Christopher Nolan is making, I mean, he can kind of do whatever he wants, but the studio was like, what? Are you fucking kidding me? And he's like, no. And, like, gets a lot of credit for starting the reconnaissance in a lot of ways.
No, Dallas. Okay, so I'm looking now. Dallas Buyers Club was the year before. Magic Mike was 2012. Mud was 2012. Oh, you're saying this was being made before that.
This was being made when that was happening, and it was because this was being made that sort of like other people were giving him more shots. Too,
yeah,
you know?
And it was right
because there was so much.
Yeah, it was like Fool's Gold, Surfer Dude, Ghost of Girlfriends Past, and then all of a sudden it's Lincoln Lawyer, Bernie, Killer Joe, Mud, Magic Mike, Dallas Buyers Club, Wolf of Wall Street, and then the same year this came out, True Detective came out, and then you're in full on like Matthew McConaughey God mode.
And then it's kind of over. I mean, there's like he's still doing stuff obviously, but like that's the real like, you know, 5 or 6 years of just golden age of Matthew McConaughey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's great, and you know, like I said, every once in a while they'll reclaim sort of actors that were good from 10 years before, which he was great in the early 90s, and
one movie.
Now we're doing we would say what movie?
I said one movie. Like, I mean, the movie that I think of for him is what?
Dazed and Confused?
Yeah, Dazed and Confused. I don't is there anything else?
No. I think he is good.
He just had promise that it was never realized, I think.
I think he is good in movies that are like not necessarily great movies, but like Amistad and what's the other A Time to Kill? You know, these movies that are kind of like flawed, but like he is doing good performances in them.
Have you guys seen Reign of Fire? So I thought I hated Matthew McConaughey. I saw Reign of Fire in theaters before I saw Dazed and Confused on video, and I saw that kind of like later in life, but I was blown away by him. I went for Christian Bale, and it's actually directed by this guy Rob Bowman, who directed a bunch of episodes of X-Files, and he did the X-Files movie. And he's great in those TV shows, but he is not a great movie director in my opinion. But Christian Bale plays it super straight in that movie, and he's a little bit, he's in like boring mode, as opposed to like American Psycho or something. And Matthew McConaughey steals the entire movie. He comes in with a shaved head, and his first, like one of his first lines is like he comes into this like group of people, and he's like, "Sorry for spoiling your soiree," and I'm just like, I almost like stood and applauded. I was like,
so much because it's like every shot of Matthew McConaughey in that movie is a hero shot, and like he is playing to that. Like he knows exactly what performance he's giving, and it fucking works.
It's like
for me.
It's like comedic.
Again, I haven't seen it since.
I will never see it again.
I saw it once after the theater, maybe, but it's been a long time. But yeah, I loved it when it came out.
He specifically is a blast in that movie.
Speaking of directors who, sorry, Chris, really quick though, directors who were bad film directors, but good at other stuff is there's no more Wally Pfister in this movie because he went on to become a director of bad movies.
Wait, what? Did he?
Yeah.
And
what did he direct?
He directed Transcendence. I think it's called
that movie. I literally could not make it through that movie. I couldn't make it through. Oh my god! I didn't know he directed that.
Christopher Nolan during before this movie. Christopher Nolan produced Transcendence, and then they haven't worked together since. Now it's all fucking Hoyt Van Hoyten, who's great. Like, I love the cinematography in this movie, and he does all the Nolan movies moving forward. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's kind of a sad story because now he made that one movie, and now he directs a lot of like TV shows and stuff, but he's not doing any more DP stuff.
I was gonna this kind of go back to the prior point. It's a little bit tangential, but speaking of former Christopher Nolan castings, who one completely outshines the other in an unexpected way, there's an old Terry Gilliam movie called The Brothers Grimm, wherein Matt Damon and Heath Ledger play the Brothers Grimm. And Damon, it's a terrible movie. Matt Damon has this absolutely abysmal British accent that just doesn't work at all, but who's really good. And the first time I was actually like, whoa, this guy's actually a good actor, was Heath Ledger. He's got, his British accent. He's got this quirky kind of like, bespectacled, like, eccentric act he has going on. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a horrible movie. It's not good, but it made me go, wait, Heath Ledger's like entertaining as hell in this movie. Is like the only saving grace, and like I'd like to see more of this guy do non-rom-com type stuff. And then of course we get that wish later. But anyway, can I say something about like some things and themes about Christopher Nolan here that kind of popped up?
Yeah, let's. I have some stuff to say about that too. Yeah, let's get started. Let's do it.
That's just the thing I wanted to point out was this. He's kind of been ramping up his fascination with this like excessively humongous visuals that keep getting bigger and bigger in a way. And by that I mean like obviously the movie has like these gigantic, bigger than life waves, like wormholes and black holes. Even this giant kind of circular city at the end, where everything's kind of in a big circle, which kind of is reminiscent of Inception when she's folding the whole city on top of itself. He's got this like the Joker with this gigantically insane pile of money that he's sitting on. It's like almost like this comical visual element, Bruce Wayne, the hole that he falls into in Batman Begins is just massively humongous, like comparatively in The Dark Knight Rises, and he keeps ramping up these visuals, and it feels like this in a way to keep upping the ante in a way, so this whole film occupies this vast, gigantic, he gets to really play with space literally and time and emphasize the enormity of the visuals and how like small the characters are with respect to some of
I kind of alluded to that last week when we were talking about like what was obvious to me about Dark Knight Rises was that the only thing that was interesting to him about making that movie was
the scale,
like how big of a scale he could put it on. Because it does feel like that's where he's really, I mean, not the only thing that he's interested in, but like that is really where he's sort of like loving playing right now, is just in like giant scale.
The visual of the wormhole as this kind of reflective bubble is so beautiful, and like the way it's so thrilling, like when they enter it and stuff, like just visually, it's such an experience. And even on the Blu-ray, they kind of replicate the IMAX experience where when it turns to IMAX footage, it like goes like full screen, full widescreen, as opposed to the regular ultra wide aspect ratio, and it looks dope. It's cool. He also has other interests, though, as you said, Ian. I thought it was interesting. Is it John Lithgow? It's somebody who says, I think it is John Lithgow who says to Matthew McConaughey, like, you don't get to just go flying out into space because you're like, oh, I used to be good at this. It was fun. And he literally says something like, you can't do the right. And he's like, no, I have to save the world. And he's like, you can't do the right thing for the wrong reason. And it sounds so much like Alfred talking to Batman, right? Like that's like, right. And I do wonder if there's like part of Christopher Nolan, like, does he think about like, why is this like an idea that like he keeps coming back to? Is it just like a story element that he's comfortable with? Or is it like, is there something about that relationship or his role in the world that he sees as like analogous to that, you know? Like, is he like, I'm doing these big movies because they're important to society or something? Like, I don't know. I just wonder.
Well, that is interesting because it is such a theme of his, and it is so, we didn't talk about it, but it is such a part of this movie. It's another fucking analogy for being a filmmaker,
right?
Like for being a director.
Yeah.
Like that is such a part of, you know, the idea that like you're sacrificing your family to do this thing.
True,
right?
yeah,
And, like,
true.
You're not
And
spending any
hundreds
time
of millions
with
of
your
dollars,
family, and you're watching their life fly by, and like you don't get it back, you know. And it's like, and that to me is like, you know, especially this second watch, I was just after watching the other ones so recently, especially Inception, where it's like that's what the fucking movie's about. I was like, he's still doing it. He's still talking about like, you know, all of his movies in a way are him exploring his own desire to like succeed and his own desire to like move forward. And I mean, it's just another fucking reflection of that.
Yeah.
And just like his own grief about what he's losing by doing what he does.
Well said, Ian. I'm glad I prompted that from you. There's another thing, which is his disdain for democracy in this movie, where they come upon NASA and they're like, why are you hidden in the desert? And it's like, well, people get mad when they can't eat, but we still have to make spaceships, and so we don't tell them anymore. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like they just kind of brush over that, and it's like, oh, okay, well, certain things people don't get to choose. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I just think that that's an interesting Nolan thing that keeps coming up.
Yeah.
And
I do think that one of the things I like about this movie, or maybe that doesn't rub me the wrong way, the way that some of his other movies do rub me the wrong way, is that it is less political in terms of like, I mean, it's there, but like the statements that it's making are generally not terrible. You know what I mean?
That is true, because it's I think the politics are very much there, but it is more there's not as much of the conservatism is not as strong in this movie. I feel like it's more just like asking questions like, look at this phenomenon and saying like, I recognize that.
That we live in.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the political world that we live in, and it doesn't like say, but here's how we fix it. We have a man who comes in and fixes everything.
Now there are still problems where it's like, you know, the idea that like, oh yeah, you know, there's no point in fixing Earth. Let's find a new planet. I mean, that you don't have to take that literally, but there are people who literally are saying that in our world right now. So it's like a little weird to hear that and just be like, cool, let's do it, when it's just like, no. But of course, the big Nolan theme that we keep coming back to, the noble lie. And in this movie, the noble lie is just like this old man doddering around in NASA, secretly not getting any work done, lying about doing his job,
just so that we can,
which I can relate to,
or have hope, I guess.
Exactly. But in this movie, like, okay, so like in the other movies, you know, in Memento, it was just like everybody lies to themselves, and you create this lie, and you know, there's, you know, it gives your life meaning or whatever, you know, and it's neutral, I guess, you know. But then in certain movies, it was like almost had like a positive spin. In Dark Knight, it's like very much like, okay, well, he doesn't need to know about this, and people don't need to know about this, and it'll all work out hopefully in the end, and there'll be a cost, but it's for the best. But then in Dark Knight Rises, it kind of it becomes something different. And maybe it reaches its like kind of like apex with Inception, where it's like now it's like fully neutral or fully like ambiguous, and then kind of comes down on the other side with Dark Knight Rises, where it's like everything's going to come out, and you at some point you're going to have to deal with this stuff. And in this movie, it seems like the big lie is not just like, oh, there's bad kind of fallout from it, but it actually seems like maybe that knowledge of that lie is a corrupting force with man,
stopping us from getting what needs to be done.
Well, it's getting in the way of like the human resilience in face of like the hard truths, and also like for man, you know, it like makes him evil. Like he's the one with that knowledge, and it's like he's taking that evil. Like they reference it early on, like he's bringing that evil into the stars, and like human deception is like kind of like at the foundation of our new society. And what's that going to mean? You know,
well said.
It's dooming us before we begin.
Also, the other giant theme in Christopher Nolan movies is it's another lead character with a dead wife. God damn it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a joke like Tarantino's feet now. Like, does every one of his main characters have to have a dead wife? It's really crazy that he just keeps not just doing it. I mean, but you know, it's obviously works in this movie. It needs to be like that, but it's, I don't know. Or it doesn't need to be, but it works that it is like that.
He should do a slasher movie where the killer only kills wives. He hasn't tackled the horror genre yet.
I think you should do Bride of Frankenstein. Just kidding.
The dead wife comes back. One thing I did not, one line, I don't know, never mind. I was just going to say, like, when John Lithgow's like, it's parent-teacher conference, not grandfather-teacher conference. I was like, as a non-parent, I cannot relate to this scene. I was like, I feel like someone cares about that line. So that's
David Oyelowo, is that his name? Oyelowo?
Yes, the guy who played MLK in Selma. And then the other teacher is the... love interest from Foot Fist Way, which is one of my favorite comedies of like the last 20 years. I love her. Yeah. So I was two heavy hitters. The woman in that scene in the parent teacher conference is the love interest in the movie The Foot Fist Way. She's like a Taekwondo student. Dude, if you haven't seen this movie, please see it. It's so funny.
Cool, because she's really familiar, but I couldn't place her, so I'll have to check.
Yeah, she's in a couple of, I think she's in also, she's a very small role in the movie. We did this one earlier and my brain is like a little sleepy. Where the one where, who's the famous guy? He wrote Superbad and he's in Freaks and Geeks. Seth Rogen.
Seth Rogen.
Yeah. The one where Seth Rogen is a security guard, and it's directed by the guy who directed Foot Fist Way.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
She works in Observe and Report. She works in the mall. She's like at a fast food place or something, and she's sort of like a very small role.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be Danny McBride in that movie, but he wasn't a big enough star.
If it was, that movie would be way more successful, I think. I mean, like as a work of art, not just like a work of Yeah,
absolutely. I want to, before we wrap up, I do want to talk about my least favorite part about this movie.
What's that?
Which is the end. I think that it's clunky and weird, and I don't get why Ellen Burstyn sends him away like that. And it just, I mean, I get it in the context of the movie. I don't know why that was the choice for the movie, to leave him as like a sort of anomaly out on his own that like has no real place, and so he goes to find Anne Hathaway. I don't know why he couldn't just have like a moving moment with Ellen Burstyn and have that be the end of the movie. Does that make sense to you guys?
No, because he has to go out and, well, first of all,
love.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the ultimate Christopher Nolan couple, which is that they're only getting together to serve the plot, and there's no actual chemistry or romance between them.
You mean Anne Hathaway
and Matt? Yeah.
But this is the thing: is I never for 1 minute thought that they were a romantic couple.
That's why. That's why it works.
And I don't think that that's why he's going at the end to meet her romantically. I think it's just because she's the only person who's from his time, like that he can understand.
Exactly. You know? She needs help. She's lonely out there. She just lost her real boyfriend. They're gonna be a couple. I'm not saying necessarily a love couple, but some sort of.
But here's the reality that's happening in the movie: is that he's lived 40 years or however old he's supposed to be in this movie of life with his daughter. Like, you know what I mean? And then he's lived like 4 months with Anne Hathaway. He should be like, no, you're my life. Like, I've only known that girl.
She's dying. She's old. She has her own family to take care of her. She doesn't need a dad anymore. That's the point.
Well, I know that's what they say,
I think it works thematically.
I
think it works thematically. He's got to keep pushing on for humanity's sake, and I don't know. I think it works well. It would have Did you find the scene with Ellen Burstyn and him like that touching? Like it was.
That's what I'm saying. Is it feels not touching to me, and I feel like
that's why it's more touching to like be like. But outer space is cool. Let's go back there. That's why it works.
Well, I'm saying that the movie did a bad choice of having it be that. I think that Ellen Burstyn's a great actress, and there's no reason why they couldn't have had it building to this moment where it's like, you were right, I was right. Like, we did this together. You know what I mean? Like, and have that be like a finale for them. Like, because it is about like love is what is driving him, and like. You know, how does that reconcile when he gets there and she's just like, we did it. but you know what? This is my family. Like you're just a nobody to me. You know, like it's like, well, but come on, like it's like, come on, we did all of this for you. Like, come on. I don't know. Anyway, that part didn't work for me, and it feels like it's ending on kind of a whimper. Like it feels like, okay, like that's. I don't know how you go from like the Tesseract incredible sequence of like 2001 filming of like a finale to then just like that like weird last 10 minutes of the movie. I almost wish, as much as they complained about how long it was, I'm gonna yell at you. As much as I wish that it was, as much as I feel like it's long, and it is long, and it feels long to me, I almost wish that they had more time to stretch if they were going to go into that part of his thing. You know, like if it wasn't condensed into 10 minutes. Like it could have been okay if this was like, 15 minutes longer almost, you know what I mean? If we're already going for it.
I'm just going to say one thing. I totally see where you're coming from. And for whatever reason he chose to, I mean, to me, it makes more sense to like, there's more story there, right? There's this other planet with Anne Hathaway on it that they didn't get to, so they have to touch on it. And her little kind of, to me, it's just like good Christopher Nolan storytelling where he's going to turn it into a montage. He's going to have this beautiful voiceover narration. He's going to throw some great, strong, powerful images at you at the last moment, swell the music up. Like that's more interesting than like a heartfelt like reunion, which like you get a tiny bit of, but it's like, that's kind of boring at this point. Again, and as an audience member, maybe, and also from Christopher Nolan's perspective, you know, he'd rather have that emotional thing happen like in an abstract way or in a clever story way where he's bending gravity through the Tesseract than just two people sitting together and being like, I love you, you know? So that it sort of makes sense in that way. But also, don't you feel like post Inception, he's kind of crossed a Rubicon where like, Ian, you're saying like this is his most human movie, but it's almost, to me, it's almost like once you've seen him do the thing with the pinwheel, like breaking it all down that way, he can't just go back and do sincere filmmaking anymore. It has to, he's like too removed from it. It's only grand filmmaking from now on because it's like, again, this is an emotional film, but it's like the stuff with the watch in this movie, right? It's a little bit perfunctory, right? Because I don't feel like he can fully invest himself into creating these stories that just function straightforwardly anymore because he's like broken that all down to such a degree. And when he pulls out the pinwheel in that movie in Inception and it's Killian and he breaks down and then you cut to Tom Hardy just smirking like, hell yeah. Like, I don't think you can go back from that and just do it again sincerely. Right. Like even the watch thing in this movie feels a little bit perfunctory, a little bit like, you know what we're doing. Come on, let's move on. Like, you know, and it's very cool. The Tesseract thing is really cool. And, but he has to kind of be working at that, in that mode, like in the Tesseract. He can't just have two people in a room and being like, look, I fixed your watch. Oh my God, thank you so much. Like, I don't know. He's like evolved beyond that now, you know? That's how I kind of read this movie. In his filmography.
It almost feels like maybe the best way to do it in my version, like if you weren't going to have him go off exploring space again, would be to have like an Inception ending where he's just walking into Ellen Burstyn's room and it cuts away. You know what I mean? How like the way he walks up to his kids and it cuts away in Inception. Whereas just like, we get it. He's going to have this emotional reunion. They don't even need to show it.
Yeah. I mean, like he's floating out in space and then they like, you know, the space police pick him up like in the Jetsons and then take him to the floating city. I mean, even that, you know, and then you have the montage there and you just have him not asleep and you have Ellen Burstyn's voice over there being like, we're going to wake you up. We're going to send you off to Anne Hathaway, blah, blah, blah. And he opens his eyes and that's the ending. Yeah, that could have worked too. Yeah. Cut 10 minutes off maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Get us in the editing room. No, I want to point out one other thing, which is one of the most beautiful images from this movie. And I feel like it's like this a recurring motif in Nolan's films visually and also thematically is the Tesseract collapsing, which feels like origami folding in on itself, which is like, you know, the folding paper and poking the pencil through it, and the way the Batman wings kind of unfold, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like he's like all about collapsing reality, like playing with physical reality like origami, playing with time like origami, and just moving the pieces of a story on paper around in a way, like constructing these elaborate things, you know, out of like these simple story elements. I think that's like maybe for me like the central visual motif of his films. So I think it's cool that it comes out. It starts coming out more visually.
I'm kind of reminded of the box in The Prestige. It has the cage with the bird in it. Just
yes,
collapses,
absolutely. Oh, exactly.
Good
Yes,
call.
exactly.
That's a good point.
I like it. Next movie is going to be different, guys.
I know. So he did emotion, and now he's going to try to do no exposition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see how it goes.
No, just kidding. Cool.
All right, should we rate these?
Oh, yeah.
I will go first. Okay, so we were doing this last week. I also, Travis, can only put the 3 Dark Knight movies together.
Okay.
Like you were saying, like as much as I did put them at the top 3, it's only because they're a triplet. Like I don't think that Batman Begins would be number 3 if it wasn't. But
Interesting.
here we are. It's Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins, Interstellar,
Cool.
Wow.
Memento, Inception, The Prestige, Insomnia, Following.
Interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. So I disagree with you guys, of course, on the Batman placement. Mine are literally all and completely in different spots. But Interstellar, the one we're talking about today, is squarely in the middle of the 9. It's directly in the center. I really, again, I kind of mentioned it. It's so great in many ways, but my flaws in it are also there as well. So I have Inception number 1, Memento number 2, then Dark Knight, The Prestige, and Interstellar for the top 5, and then Dark Knight Rises, Insomnia, Batman Begins, and Following.
I think that's a really good list. Here's my list. Dark Knight trilogy, number 1. And again, yeah, I think none of them would I don't think they would be any one of them would be like top 2 maybe, or maybe definitely not 1. Number 2 is Inception. 3, Memento. 4, Interstellar. I really love Interstellar. I think it's so cool. I want a TARS spinoff though, or like a TARS holiday special.
TARS Hulu show.
Yeah, 5. No, 5 Prestige, 6 Following, 7 Insomnia. But yeah, so far, like just to reiterate, like all so good. Like if any one of these came on TV, I would be like, oh hell yeah, let's check it out.
Yeah, and like I said, like if anybody was like, no, you know what my favorite one is? The Prestige. I'd be like, of course it is.
Because
like,
there's so much
so
much thought and so many ideas in these films and so many beautiful images and so many great performances. Like there's so many flaws, but they're so easy to like put up with when you're getting such rich films. Like that's what I think a lot of Christopher Nolan haters don't appreciate.
100.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll see you again, film friends.
Thanks for listening, film friends. Till we meet again.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Auteur Detour. We'll see you again next week.